السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Welcome to a new episode in our series إن أريد إلا الإصلاح ما استطعت. Today we are talking about desires. And to start, how can we control our desires? All of us, we do have desires. All of us, we have things that we want and we like and we aspire for and so on. The question here is, are you driven by these desires or you are in control of yourself and your own desires? And what happens when you lose control for your desires? What happens when your desires are the ones who are actually driving you? You lose focus, you actually struggle with consistency in your ibadah, in your worship. You become a slave to a temporary pleasure. So when we look at how we as agents of change are supposed to perceive and interact and deal with our desires, you would like to be in control and you would like to be in the driver's seat. So that's the optimal and that's the ultimate situation. So when we look at what our Quran told us about desires, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us in Surah Al-Nazi'at, وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. And for that person who is fearing the state and the status and the position of his Lord, and he is forbidding himself from all evil, and in particularly from desires, فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. So because he is restraining himself from his desires, then indeed paradise will be his ultimate ending. So this is actually making it very clear, couldn't be more crystal clear, that if you want to achieve Jannah, you need to be in control of your own desires. And controlling your desires is not a one-off action. It's not just an activity that you would do overnight and you would say, oh, you know what, now I'm in control of my desires. It's a lifelong journey. It's a continuous daily battle. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us the extreme example. On the other hand, in Surah Al-Jathiyah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, chapter 45, verse 23, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ وَأَضَلَّهُ اللَّهُ عَلَى عِلْمٍ وَخَتَمَ عَلَى سَمْعِهِ وَقَلْبِهِ وَجَعَلَ عَلى بَصَرِهِ غِشَاوَةً فَمَنْ يَهْدِيهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ اللَّهِ. Have you seen that person who has elevated his desires to become his Lord? So he's following blindly his desires to the extent that these desires are almost like his Lord. وَأَضَلَّهُ اللَّهُ عَلَى عِلْمٍ. And Allah is misguiding him, although he did have prior knowledge. So he did receive knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but Allah is not making this knowledge beneficial. So he is effectively misguided. وَأَضَلَّهُ اللَّهُ عَلَى عِلْمٍ وَخَتَمَ عَلَى سَمْعِهِ وَقَلْبِهِ وَجَعَلَ عَلَى بَصَرِهِ غِشَاوَةً. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put a seal on his what? On his hearing, سمعه وقلبه, on his heart, وجعل على بصره غشاوة, and Allah put a veil in front of his sight. فَمَنْ يَهْدِي مِنْ بَعْدِ اللَّهِ. Who is able to actually guide him after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did misguide him? So here, what controls your decisions? Like, are your principles or your impulses are the ones who are in control of your decisions? And here, also the verse, one of the things that we can understand crystal clear here is there are some groups of people that continue to follow their desires to the extent that they would become, these desires are comparable to their Lord. May Allah protect us all. And obviously, there is nothing better here to complement these two verses than the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where the Prophet ﷺ told us in Sahih Muslim that Jannah is surrounded by hardships, while hellfire is surrounded by desires. So the path of Jannah is very clear, and also the path to hellfire is very clear. The path to Jannah is surrounded by hardships. So you can't imagine you entering Jannah without going through hardships. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us crystal clear in the Holy Quran that we are here to be tested. ألف لام ميم أحسب الناس أن يتركوا أن يقولوا آمنا وهم لا يفتنون. Do people think that they will be okay, they will be successful, they will be left by only saying that they did believe, while they are not truly tested. And we have tested those who came before them so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would distinguish those who are truthful from the liars. May Allah protect us all. So we're talking here about being an agent of change and being a caller to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The agent of change, the golden rule here is, the agent of change is a master in self-control. So if you want to be a leader in reform, you need to master controlling your own self. And the Prophet ﷺ obviously did demonstrate for us the example, not just in Ramadan, but to train his soul year long to resist unnecessary indulgence in any sort of laghu, in any sort of misguidance and so on. And obviously he has given us the entire example. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. So now, to be practical, as we always want, how can we actually leverage Ramadan to train ourselves to control our desires? Number one, I will share with you the 10-second rule. So before following an impulse, before following your own desire, before doing anything, pause. Pause for 10 seconds and think and ask yourself, does this bring me closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We want to do this exercise for different acts of worship, not just for controlling our desires. But you can, the good news here is that you can apply the very same action, but for multiple reasons. So here, we want to apply it for controlling our own desires. Pause, as I said, and ask yourself for 10 seconds, would this get me closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So that's number one. Number two, fasting itself is a training to control your own desires. What is better than always reminding yourself that I'm controlling now myself, I'm stopping myself from permissible acts. In normal days, these are permissible acts. We all know this. But in Ramadan, for a specific period of time, specific days, and time duration during the day, you are making whatever permissible in normal days, in normal hours, not permissible. And this is actually shouldn't be just applied in a mechanical way. We always need to be thoughtful when fasting, and we always need to think about what is the reasoning behind fasting. And there is no better reasoning here related to our context than controlling our own desires. So if you are to fast, try to train yourself on controlling yourself in order for you later on, post-Ramadan, to be able to control yourself after Ramadan. And also, number three, try to fast beyond Ramadan. Like throughout the year, fasting itself is a self-control training that is formidable, that you allow that. And actually, like for those people that are, for example, trying to control their weight and apply weight loss and so on, now even intermittent fasting is very, very obvious and very clear and very famous. Why? Because it trains you to be able to control your desires. And finally, replace temptations with alternatives. So if you struggle with wasting time on electronics, on social media, wasting or watching harmful content, for example, or overeating, whatever excess that you typically conduct, in whichever angle, it doesn't matter. Try to be able to control these desires by substituting them with something else that is beneficial, like a good habit, exercising, doing dhikr, whatever works for you. You are the one who knows yourself the most. And finally, this Ramadan is actually a golden opportunity for us to be able to train ourselves to become better Muslims, better agents of change, and better masters of reform by controlling ourselves. So will you be that person that will be stepping up and controlling himself or herself? You have the question and you have the answer. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم وجزاكم الله خير.